Ah, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome everyone to the 440 Gallery Artist Talk. Today, I'm excited to say that we are going to look at Gail Flanery's solo show, Perennial, as well as the show in the project space, True to Form, which features the work of Fred Bendheim, Richard Barnet, and Ellen Chuse. So we'll start off taking a look at the installation, but I want to say these shows are up through July 2nd, and I would highly recommend coming to see them in person. They're amazing. And I'm happy you're here today to see them virtually because we get to talk to the artists as well. The talk, as you see, is being recorded and it will be available on the website, as well as previous artist talks if you have any interest. So there are our lovely members. Gail. The installation shots, so you get a little flavor of what it's like in the gallery. And now we're looking at the individual pieces of Gail's. And so maybe as we, let's take a look at them all first. And then I'll ask Gail a few questions.
Okay.
So I think that's the last one. Yes. So Gail, congratulations on a beautiful show.
Thank you.
This work and this configuration, including natural objects and drawing on the wall, it's a departure for you. Can you tell us how your path led you here?
Well, there have always been naturalistic references in my imagery, but a lot of these drawings of trees and flowers and gosh, I just didn't show very much. But Amy Williams was over helping me sort of think about what I was going to do for my next show. And she had me open my flat file that said trees. And I went, oh, you don't want to see that. She was like, yes, I do. And her advice, I think, was very good. She said, let's put up something that isn't absolutely expected. And I appreciated that. I was like, yeah, let me get these things out, frame them and put them up. Also, I had just been down in Merida, Mexico, and I had been noticing these beautiful, beautiful drawings of trees on the outsides of buildings. People were doing it in all kinds of ways with everything from spray paint to chipping away to painting on the stone. And so I asked Amy, I said, would it be all right if I do a drawing on the wall? And she said, oh yeah, good, sure. And so that was kind of exciting. The whole concept began to come together in these really pretty wonderful ways. So I'm pleased. Thanks.
Yeah. And well, you should be. Let's focus on the drawing on the wall that we're seeing right here now. Can you tell us more about what inspired it and how it unfolded?
Well, again, like I said, Merida really inspired me. I was looking at a lot of the art down there, and I am usually in the park if the weather allows me. Every day I walk around Prospect Park, and the trees, they're just so beautiful. The whole linear call and it just began to, I love those lines. And so I've just been sketching trees for a long, long time. And the working on the wall was a lot of fun. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it. So I brought a lot of supplies in, collage, ink to roll on, paint. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. But the minute I took out my pencil and made a mark with the carbon down the wall, that was it. I wasn't going to use anything else. It just felt so good. And I was able to use my thumb and to push the carbon around. And it was really a pretty wonderful experience. I may have told a couple of you the funny story that happened with my little cohort who came in. I was drawing on the wall. I was by myself in the gallery, and someone tapped on the door, and it was a lady who and her son, and she was looking for Amy. And I answered the door, and she said, "Oh, is Amy here?" And I said, "Oh no, she is working at Lincoln Center," and blah blah blah. But the little boy comes running in. He was about, I'm guessing about 6 or 7, and he comes tearing over to the wall where I'm drawing on the wall, and which was fascinating to him, I'm sure, for many reasons. But I had, just before he had come over, I had taken a small little container of water, and I had sprayed the graphite, the carbon, to see if I could move it around. And that's when the door tapped, and some of the liquid rolled down to the bottom from the drawing. This carbon just rolled down. It made this droopy roll all the way down to the bottom of the wall. And the little boy looks up at me and he said, "I really love your drippy roots." And I just started laughing and thanking him. I went, "Oh my God, this is a collaboration. You just helped me figure out how I was going to absolutely finish this piece off down at the bottom." And so then there was a bit more water sprayed on and more drippy roots occurred. But it was such a wonderful, just spontaneous thing, and it tickled me to pieces. It was kind of cool. I imagine that sort of stuff happens a great deal to those artists down in Merida that are working outside, and people are walking by, and yeah. So
Yeah, and seeing this piece, I wonder if you're going to get commissions, since it's so engaging.
I have had one question about just that. I will see. I mean, I'm going to have to ask a few people. I may ask Doris and a few people. I'm like, so how do you do a commission? Do you charge by the hour, or how do you figure out, how does you preserve it? How do you, I mean, this drawing on the wall, I'm not worried about past the end of the show, but if someone, I mean, it's pretty interesting. We'll see what happens, but to be continued.
Yes, very interesting. So my next question is about the directness of your color, the form and line. They make your work feel fresh and unique. Can you speak to your process? Because I'd love to hear about what draws you to monotype.
Well, monotype is called the painterly print, and it's basically it basically is your painting, but you're painting on a plate, and you're using inks, various kinds of inks. They can be oil-based or water-based, sort of like if you're using paint. And I really have I love paper. I have such an affinity for paper. So printmaking was kind of a funny rabbit hole I fell down, and loved it. And to be able to paint on these plates, sometimes I'll use it the way I use brushes and actually paint on the plate the way you would a canvas. Other times I've done things, I have 2 pieces where I rolled out black ink on these 2 plates, and then I used palette knives and scoops and my fingers to remove the ink. So it was almost a negative kind of.
Are those pieces in the show?
They're too dark.
Can you direct K, which one?
They're black,
The other
And
direction, yeah.
nope, keep going.
There-
Those, yeah, those were the ones that I actually removed ink. So the drawing was done by making the mark by removing ink. So that was fun. Printmaking is my passion because there's a good deal of uncertainty with it all the time, which I like. I like provocation. I don't want to be repeating my work. I don't want my work predictable in a way, and printmaking has allowed me to really explore push techniques. Experimenting with this media is really valuable to me. I get a lot through printmaking that way, and through the help of the master printers that I often collaborate with. They'll tell me something as silly as, take that piece of paper over there, crumple it up into a ball. Okay, lay it out, roll the ink over that. Okay, now put that down on the paper and run it through the press. And you're thinking, what am I going to get? You pull it up, and there's all this exquisite little folded line that came from you making a ball out of that piece of paper, and you're like, oh, look at that, man, totally cool. And you begin to build on these experiments. And like I said, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and the print becomes collage material, which has also been useful. So yeah, I probably wandered away from what you asked a bit, but
Yeah. No, no, you're tapping into your intuition, which is always fascinating. And what I wanted to ask is, this show kind of something of a point. How has putting this show together influenced your direction? Where do you think it will go from here?
Well, I will be back printing. I'm going to be back in the print shop, and I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose that's one of the wonderful things for me about being an artist, is I'm not sure where I'm going exactly. I mean, I will be working on paper. I will be using printmaking. I will be probably adding in with collage. I might be printing over. Anyway, I'm going to let my imagery grow. Nature gives me so much more than I can even imagine to work with. So, be it form, inside form, you know what I mean, Ellen, about that, or lines. I mean, the linear work too. And I'm always thinking about color harmonies. So I'll continue.
Well, we look forward to seeing what comes next. And finally,
you.
would you like to say something about that you have around the gallery, so you can orient those that may come visit and inform those that can't make it about what else they're going to see around the gallery?
I only got part of that question, so it was. Could you just repeat the first part? You want me to speak about work that's in the gallery, or my work?
I'm going to switch to I'm going to switch to a hotspot. I don't know if it's me or if it's you or something else. So bear with me.
Got it.
This will just
No
take
worries.
a second. I thought.
She's frozen.
I think she'll be back when
What
the
would you
switch
say?
happens.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
I can. Yeah.
All right, sorry. So I'll repeat the question. Gail,
Okay.
what would you like to say about the variety of material that you have around the gallery? I don't want to spoil the fun. I want you to be able to tell people about what else is
Oh,
waiting
oh,
in there.
oh, yes. Okay. Well, part of me being out wandering around in trees and nature is lately there's been a veil of politic over the whole thing with my concern about climate change and trees burning down and just the loss that's happening all over the world. So I had been thinking about that a bit when I mean, also, the trees were an obvious reference. Um, but I've been thinking about that. I've been writing down little quotes here and there so I was talking about trees and I wrote down this thing and I thought, oh, I'm going to print that out and just toss it into the gallery. So I wrote down a little sentence that basically says, trees are so fundamental: shade, shelter, privacy. And because they are, I mean, they are, for humans, for animals, I mean, it's this amazing, you look at when you see a tree cut and you look at the trunk and you look at the rings that hold time, as you're looking at these amazing things we live with on our earth. And so I've been sort of thinking about that. And I also wrote another thing that I had read that someone was talking, and I kind of made it up myself from what I got from this conversation, that the quote is, in every walk with nature, one receives far more than they seek. And that is something that pretty much happens to me when I walk around the park, I have to say. I have everything from rescuing baby turtles to finding a new kind of branch or bark shape, or even just an exquisite sky, the color of an absolutely exquisite sky. There's this powerful relationship to the natural world that needs to be honored and cared for. So,
Absolutely. Thank you, Gail. And you also have a box there in the gallery. You want to say something about
oh,
that?
right. Yes. I also impulsively, as I was pulling out all this work, I have, as I said, I actually draw trees and flowers and even bugs, all kinds of things. And I pulled out this box of small drawings and prints that I've been doing for a long, long time. And I thought, what the heck? And I threw them in a box. They're unframed. They're just, sketches, basically. And I put them in that box on the windowsill. And I invite whoever wants to prowl through the box to prowl through the box. And people seem to have been enjoying being able to go through my work with their hands and look at it. And it's okay. I'm fine with it. And actually, I made more sales than I ever expected through that box, which was very interesting. Oh, well, look at this.
There.
Who even knew that was going to happen? But then at one point also, there's a bunch of twigs that are kind of tacked to the wall, and that was my wonderful colleague Janet, who was helping me hang the show, and she had seen some of these sketches of branches that I brought in, pencil sketches, just on paper, and she went, "Wow, where do you do this?" And I said, "Oh, I have bouquets of twigs at my studio." She said, "Would you run home and bring some in?" And I went, "You want me to run home and get twigs?" Sure. So I tailed back, handed her the twigs. She wrapped a little string around them and nailed them to the wall, the window. So another colleague, not only with drippy roots, but with my hanging twigs. These were my colleagues. I'd love to say it was my idea, but it came from a little boy and from my exquisite colleague at 440, Bennett. And it made part of what made the show an awful lot of fun and to create, I have to say.
Well, it's really beautiful result. Gail, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And now let's take a look at the installation shots for True to Form. Ellen Chuse, Richard Barnet, and Fred Bendheim. And now let's talk to Ellen. Let's take a look at Ellen's pieces. Beautiful. Ellen. Oh, yes. And this lovely sculpture. Ellen, congratulations on your inclusion in this wonderful show. I love thinking of the title, True to Form, while looking at your work. Can you please talk about what form means to you here in these pieces?
Well, thanks, Karen. And first, I just want to say it's wonderful to show again with Richard and Fred. Our work has a lot in common. It was exciting to put the show together, and I think it really sings. And just in the gallery, for those of you who can go, Gail's show has this wonderful, cool, airy feeling. And then you go into the project space and there's all this color, and it's just a nice juxtaposition. So Fred actually said something a while back that really resonated with me. He was asked which came first in his work, color or form. And he said, form comes first. And at that moment I thought, well, of course form comes first. But then I realized that's not true for everyone. And so finding the form, drawing the form, refining the form, all of those are really essential for me. And the form has to have meaning for me, whether it's my more representational work, as in my botanical or landscape work, or in the case of this work, which is more reductive, using archetypal forms. And these forms, they're very simple, but they, as simple as they may seem, they carry many meanings. And I like that because it allows the viewer to bring their own references, their own experiences to the work. And then the color for me just takes it to another level. It creates even deeper meaning, at least for me. And I hope the emotional resonance of both the color and the form will engage the viewer. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
And
really,
how lovely that we get a taste of sculpture from all three of you. And maybe we can move to the sculpture, okay, please. And I know that this piece is from some years back and the paintings are recent, but interestingly, there are many connections and contrasts. Can you speak to these as you see them at this point?
sure. When we were preparing the show, I realized that all three of us were either former or current sculptors, or recovering sculptors, as Fred would say. And we just thought it would be fun. It would be interesting to each show a small piece of sculpture along with our paintings. And in the 1960s and 70s, I was a sculptor. And I suppose I considered myself a sculptor until about 20 some years ago, even though I was only mostly making drawings. Eventually I was focused, I always worked in natural materials, wood and metals and, beeswax for casting. And then I was focusing on hand-built fired clay. And even then my work went in two directions. Some clay work is very lyrical, it evokes plant forms and landscapes. And then there's period in the latter part of, in 1975, 76, 77, where the pieces get more streamlined and again, more archetypal form. And this little piece is called Pod, and it's from 1975. And I chose it for two reasons. One, it's freestanding, which is really helpful, which it had to be. And it's also small. Those were the prerequisites for this show. And I felt that it echoed the seeming simplicity of the forms that are in my paintings, which are in the show. But it also, it's very organic, and it has a kind of seductive quality that I hope I can achieve now through both form and color.
Yes, well said. I think it does echo the evocative shapes that paintings. But my next question is about your palette. That I know you touched on the use of color, but your palette is so energetic, and that it just makes these pieces riveting. I wonder if you could talk about, your use of color and and whatever you want to say about it.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm one of those people, I work pretty intuitively. And so I only realize what I've done in my life long after I've actually done it. So now that I'm painting, I realize that I've always been totally seduced by color. But for decades, I was terrified to use it in my artwork. And once I took the plunge into paint, and that's a long story, which I won't bore anybody with now, I seem to have let go of all inhibitions and just embraced strong saturated color, which spoke to me. Of course, over the last 20 years, I think my ability to build on that has certainly evolved. And again, the color has such deep emotional resonance, and I always hope to convey some of my feeling in making the work to the viewer through color. And as I mentioned before, I mean, this is a perfect example because as an artist, I work intuitively. And originally there were more images in this painting, two blue, but they weren't working for me as I had hoped. So eventually I painted them all out except for the two blue orbs, and that's where the title came from. And the other forms are there, they're underneath, and they're very veiled, but they are there. And I feel that they add a certain richness and depth to the large expanse of saturated red-orange color. But I doubt that I could actually recreate it because it happened, and then finally it gave me the feeling that I was looking for. And I guess I'm always looking for a feeling when it comes to color. I would like the viewer to fall into the color, to become one with the color, and a very physical sensation, which is something that I have around color. So
A sculptor's approach to color.
yes, exactly. And I think one of the reasons that I love working on paper is similar to, it's very, and working on form, it's just, you just have to get your hands into it. You have to touch it. And I think that, yes, the physicality of it. So, yeah. I don't know if I think that probably answers it, sort of. And this one, it just continues my my large tantric dark forms. I think of as portals. So I'm thinking a lot about portals these days.
That bit of information, thinking of them as portals.
Yeah. But they could be very different for someone else.
Ambiguous portals.
Ambiguous portals. Thank you. The title of my next show, right? Yeah. I also wanted to mention that the show actually goes through Sunday, July 3rd. So if you're around,
Did
Um,
I say the wrong date? I'm sorry.
You said July 2nd, but that's okay. But if you're around that weekend and you want to come by on the 3rd, I'm sure a bunch of us will be hanging around in the late afternoon. And we'd love to say hello.
Thank you for correcting me and letting people know that's going to be a mini event. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you, Karen.
And now let's take a look at Richard's work. Wonderful. Richard, congratulations on your showing in True to Form.
Thank you very much.
Your work here, aside from the sculpture that we're looking at right now, has saturated color, a profusion of forms. These pieces seem to have a urgency and intensity that I haven't seen in your previous work. I wonder if we could just take a look at one of these, like maybe this one, and maybe you could just tell us what goes into it. What do you have to say about this piece?
Okay, I'll say I'll do what I can. th- when I sketched it, because I draw first. When I sketched it, I wanted to have kind of an overall format to work in. And as I worked on it, you're absolutely right. The colors did become more saturated because I was trying to bring up values. I was trying to bring up intensity, saturation. And the only way that I could do that was to increase the saturation. And I might have treated some of the watercolor as gouache, meaning I might have put it on so heavily that it would be more like acrylic than watercolor. But in a way, it was the problem of trying to see everything that is in the pattern or design, if you're willing to call it a design, to make it visible to people. And the only way I found I could do that was with these overlays of paint and with a lot of really very strong colors, even in the dark tones, and a lot of color in the tones. So it was really trying to bring up and clarify what I had got going. It's almost like you start running the race and then you realize you've got to do this, that, and the other thing to get yourself over the finish line.
I love that analogy.
Thank you.
And you're right that there's something so compelling about the saturation of the color. It really works. And so you talked
On the
about.
other hand, someone might say it looks like art done by a 2 or a 3-year-old.
I would not say that.
Okay, thank you.
But let's move to. I wanted to look at. Correct me on the title. What goes in
The second one?
this one? Is it a waking up with Folgers?
Yes, the title is the best part about waking up is Folgers in your cup, with coffee, of course. And I wish I had left that part out and just called it the best part about waking up. But I wanted it to be kind of electric, is one way I can describe it. And also, it's obviously much more complicated because you've got all these different zones where things are, the zones I hope are somewhat unified by the patterns and the shapes of them, but there are an awful lot of them, even on an 18 by 24 piece of so again, there had to be quite a lot of sort of almost like shock to the colors to make everything visible, to let people see everything. And I don't think I did a lot of repainting, but I was very aware of trying to make it possible just to see everything, because it's a very busy piece, really.
It's complex, yes, and
Thank you. I like that word better.
And the visual design is striking. And I wonder if you want to say more about what meaning it has for you besides the
Well, it doesn't, because in this, as in the other one, I was really just, okay, I sometimes work with very specific meanings, political meanings, historical meanings, personal meanings, but I didn't with this that I'm aware of. And I find that there's something very satisfying about doing that. I find that it's, in a way, it's more fun because I don't have to have some kind of inner script that I'm trying to follow. So to me, this is a kind of a more fun way to work, and just develop it as best I can, and that's enough. It doesn't have to carry the weight of some sort of a political statement or you know, any other kind of message. What was that?
No,
That yeah.
I agree, and but I also think that just the fun of it has a meaning in itself. Um, that idea of playfulness and um, willing to be absurd and complex at the same time. I think that that has a certain meaning of its own.
Thank you.
And I have one more question for you, Richard. And let's move to the sculpture again.
Sure.
Um, the I was seeing some connections between the sculpture and the other work, but it sounds like it's kind of a separate practice for you. Can you just talk about your approach to sculpture?
Yes. Well, for a long time, I, I did not per se start out going to art school. I started out in other ways, and then spent a great deal of time at the Art Students League, and doing and at the National Academy School, and also doing a lot of work in my studio with models, which I was able to do because I shared the cost of working with the models with other people. And so I really got quite a bit of background in what you might call traditional figurative sculpture. And and it's a piece that's cast in bronze. I think it's about 16 inches wide by maybe about 10 inches high or 12 inches high. I can't really remember the exact dimensions, but it's not that big. I wish I had a slide of it. There, I have them, but I don't have it here, of the back of the piece. But to me, one of the things that's very important in any piece of work is making it visible, is one way to describe it, making it so that people can see it, can see the whole thing and see how the parts of it connect with each other and how they hopefully are in balance and hopefully have a kind of congruity to them. And with the figure, of course, the human figure has infinite and enduring and immense beauty. And it's probably the most widely used subject in art, going back so many thousands of years, but certainly going back to the Greeks and the Romans. And that raises two things. One is that you're kind of, you know, that you're sort of playing in the same game as people who write music, who are aware of a great deal of history. And I am, probably partly because I taught art history, but partly because I love art. So there are a lot of givens in sculpture of this kind. One of them being that most of the time you patina the piece with a certain color. And the black patina in this follows that with a good deal of shining, a good deal of wax, so that in a way, you might say it's almost just following what other people have done, but there's a reason that they did it. And it's, to me, it's a treat to work with something that is so lovely as the human figure, and it has such great history across the history of art.
And so well done. That's really
Thank
beautiful
you.
piece. And I want to mention that if you go to the 440 Gallery Instagram page, you'll see a post from yesterday that shows the back and the front of this
Oh,
sculpture.
thank you very much.
And the back is quite lovely as well. And it's interesting that in your language, talking about finding the complexity and the balance of form, it is similar to what you're doing in your watercolors, only with such a different result. And this is, recalling all the history of art, and but it's uniquely yours as well. And it's also so grounded and, um, three and dimensional, whereas your, the way into your paintings is different. So
Karen, I want to thank you for that.
you're welcome. uh, and the work is beautiful. So thank you for showing in true to form.
Thank you. Would it be possible to just flip to that slide? I know the piece isn't in the show, but it does illustrate something. The
Sure.
that one, yes, that one. Um, I think most people would see that this is quite different. It's a shape uh, with a background to it, for one thing. And I did it as a memorial for a friend of mine, and I'm not going to go into the conditions of that, but I believe it's called For Anne on a Rainy Evening. And what occurs to me with this is that it's possible that is a fairly, you could use, I mean, I could use that as a kind of a sketch or a diagram for making a sculpture. And to me, it also illustrates something about shape, about the term shape that occurred to me, which is that when sculptors think about shape, I think there's no sharp division between shape that's on the flat and shape that's in the round. And that may be a whole nother topic. But the experience that I usually had when I was teaching was that people started out almost completely thinking of shapes as flat, maybe because it had never occurred to them they could bend them even in a drawing. So I just mentioned that it's, in a way, we can't escape our sins. You know,
Well, yeah, and you look at things with a sculptor's eye,
thank you.
so definitely, um, this is a very, very sculptural drawing, painting, I should say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move on to Fred Bendheim. So let's take a look at his work. Wow. Fred, congratulations on a powerful grouping of work in true to form. I am pleased to see the spiral form embedded in all of these pieces. What does the spiral represent for you, and or why do you find the spiral so compelling?
Oh, hi. Thanks, Karen. Um, yeah, I've been using spirals a lot recently in my work. Um, and I find them interesting because they are, as a shape, they seem to be moving. They seem to have a movement to them, and although they're of course still at the same time. So I like that sort of puzzle to them, that they seem to have different characteristics and opposite characteristics at the same time. And yeah, and then they can actually spin in different directions too. And then I like the references to nature, of course, to the macro, the solar system. I mean, sorry, to the galaxies, and also to things like shells, seashells, and fingerprints. They have all these different references, and of course they've been used by many artists. I always liked Georgia O'Keeffe's big shells that she painted, and I love Robert Smithson's spiral jetty that he did in Salt Lake.
Yeah, you're in good company. I love
they're playful too. I like the playfulness.
Yeah, and they give you an opportunity to like make the energy move in different ways within one piece, which is fascinating. I like that you use the word puzzle, because I feel like that's one of the fascinating things about your work, that um, it's a puzzle how you get all these transparencies and shapes and movement to all work so beautifully together.
Yeah, so, and actually, while you have, I just want to tell you the title of this one's called Sunset. And so it's definitely influenced by growing up in the Southwest and seeing lots of sunsets with sort of hallucinogenic colors that are just normal there. And then of course the Native American art that I saw too, with a lot of spiral petroglyphs influenced me too. And the sun, the sun's
Yeah.
always dominant.
You can feel all those references. That's incredible. Thank you. So it's also wonderful to see your sculpture, especially in relation to the other work nearby. So can we move to that sculpture? Yeah. So can you speak to that and what's similar and what's different about this particular spiral?
Yeah, well, this sculpture came quite a bit earlier than the other ones. I believe this is from about 2006, when I was doing a series of wood sculptures, and I found it was a part of a chair rail, the spiral part, and then I combined it with some other architectural wood pieces that I found. It does. I did two versions of this piece, and this one has more painterly aspect because the stain is dripping down. It looks like you can see the stain dripping, and so I think it's so maybe it has something to do with painting. I was thinking about painting even back then, doing this, and I call it thing. This is called thing 2. And, it's a question mark.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You mentioned before, it looks like a question mark, and once you say that, then it takes on more layers of meaning.
Yeah, and I think it's a good subject matter for art. I think a question mark, because
I think
you
so
know,
too.
it's never settled what the art is and what it means. So it's a question.
Right, and it's like a connection to that idea that your pieces are puzzles. That a puzzle is always a puzzle could be a question mark too.
Yeah.
So now I want to move back to the wall pieces. There's so much energy in these pieces, and the compositions, along with, to me, seems like it's your system of color and light is getting increasingly complex, and it gives, and the pieces have a sense of inner light and energy. So it's like the light sources from within. Can you speak to this?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's observant of you to notice that. Yes. Yeah. So it's part of the. I think there's a history of painting where you see the light source in the painting. You know, I'm thinking of this. A lot of sort of Baroque painters who did candlelight painting. You would see the candle, and
Right.
so that's that's in that tradition. Yeah, I mean these have to do with meditation, or the light, the lights from within. Too. It's a different kind of light, sort of it's a spiritual or mental light, I suppose. That I think that's what you're seeing. So but the other thing, what I just want to say about the spirals is that the challenge is to get them so that I want the viewer to look at it like you've never seen it, and you think that you've never seen a spiral before. Like this is the first. That's the challenge, that it doesn't become like a recognizable shape. That's the challenge of doing the sort of archetypal shapes like circles and things, because we've seen so many of them that it's hard to keep one to be fresh, like it's the first time you've seen that. it's hard.
Well, you're totally succeeding. There's no, to me anyway, there's no sense that, oh, look, another spiral.
Yeah,
I'm
but
totally,
it's a challenge for me doing them, because after a while I think, well, how can I make this interesting for myself? Do another spiral. So that's the challenge.
these pieces are intriguing and feel so fresh and unique that between the twist that you put on everything and the light coming from within the painting, they're just really special and unique. So
Oh, thank you.
well done, Fred.
Yeah, this one is called Targets and Spirals.
Ah,
It's a very small painting. It's I think it's only about 12 inches high, 10 or 12 inches. But they're actually more work. The smaller ones are more work. They're harder to do. Yeah. Because everything has to be masked with masking tape, and it's much harder to do that on a small scale.
oh, I can appreciate that. And yeah, let's look at the others, and you maybe just want to say the size relative.
Yeah, that's also a small piece. I believe that's about 18 or 20 inches high, and that's called Blue Window. And that one is Sunset is I think it's 36 inches high. That's the largest piece.
Pretty large, yeah.
Yeah, that one has a lot of elements to it. So it's that one is a lot of work.
Well, again, I invite everyone to come to the gallery if you can make it. There's just an explosion of energy in the project space that you'll be happy to experience in real life. But thank you, Fred.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Thanks.
And let's open the questions to everyone. Does anyone have a question? You could type it in the chat, or you could just unmute and go ahead and ask. And it could be for anyone. And Kay will graciously bring us to different images if need be.
Well, I'll start. I have a question for Gail. Can you hear me? Yeah. So Gail, this work, I think it's earlier than your other shows, but it has a different feel. It is a very open and airy feel, and it gives the gallery a lot of it has a lot of space around it, it gives people a good feeling, I think. But it also reminds me of Asian art somewhat, with the spare elements. I was wondering if that was something you were thinking about. Gail.
Oh, you need to unmute, Gail. You're still muted.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I am influenced by Asian art quite a bit. So that's a good observation. Definitely. And certainly when I was doing my mokohanga woodcuts, it's a similar movement. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a Japanese term for they have for their art. I'm trying to remember what it is exactly. Something like it's not, I think I mentioned it to you the other day, but it means subtle beauty. They have a term for that.
That's a very beautiful term, subtle
Yeah.
beauty. Thanks.
I think it was very interesting, Gail, how the work in this show is all organized around line, even the drawing on the wall, and even the branch that is in the front space. And it's a different quality of composition than some of the prints that you've done more recently. So and the line is very varied. It's not the same line throughout. It's not the same line even throughout one piece. And I mean, even looking at what we just looked at, that branch twists around, and they have the same complexity as some of your other work, but really in a different way. So, you know, I don't know if you're thinking about going back to adding more line, or, you know, not that you have to answer these questions, but you know,
Well,
what year range would you say these are about?
the year that I did them.
About, you know,
Well, there's one, a number of them are done in 2022. And the oldest piece goes back to 2013. So I again, it's funny, you know, I do, there are multiple sort of focuses that I'm, visual focuses. Sometimes it's form, and sometimes it's the color, and it's you know, a palette really that moves it, and sometimes it's line and shape. The one constant is nature. The one constant is my source, be it palette, line, or form. Even sensuality that I find in line comes from nature. It's totally what I see when I'm out there, you know, sitting under a tree, or you know, certainly whenever I was in Montana, or even when I was doing that residency in Japan, I was out under Mount Fuji and looking at nature. That feeds me. So I see the difference, but it's funny because it's all coming from the same place, really. I'm being fed from the same visuals, so.
That's a wonderful painting. I love that one.
Thanks. Thank
It's
you.
almost like an emptiness inside of it almost.
Yeah, that's really good.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred.
I wanted to ask Fred something. In terms both of the conception and execution of your pieces, could you say something about how the shape of the painting and the shape of the material upon which the painting is painted, how those two relate to one another? Does one come first, and how do they interact along the way?
I do a lot of drawing. So I start by just drawing whatever comes into my head mostly. I do lots and lots of sketches. And when I find something interesting, I develop those shapes. Then, you know, I'm making a composition, you know, with these lines. So then once I have that composition, then I'll sort of know the shape of the format, the shape of the whole piece will take. But I don't know that until I've done the drawing, you know, and have the elements. Yeah, so I like this one because it's like the shape of a cloud. I like that idea of like a sunset in the shape of a cloud. So it's combining those.
This is my favorite. So once you've made the cutout, because you know the shape of the cutout because you made sketches. So when you translate the sketch onto the cutout, to what extent are there changes made in the painting itself?
There's some. I can even add, you know, if I make a mistake and cut off too much from the board, I'm using PVC board. I can even add, you know, more to it. I figure out, you know, I can do that with some joint compound, and so if I did make a mistake, I try not to, but they, like carpenters say, measure twice, cut once. Yeah, but this one had, you know, it had some change in going to it, but it's very time consuming, you know, when if I have to go over something, because everything has to be masked. Every shape is masked individually. And so if I have to do it several times, it just adds more work.
Right. So at what point do you understand how the colors will layer upon one another? In other words,
Well,
do you
I
have
sort of,
that?
I usually have a pretty good idea before I start, because I
Okay.
often do like a watercolor sketch.
Mhm.
Well, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thanks.
It's I mean, spirals are fascinating. They go all the way back in history. And the other thing about them is they're simultaneously 2- and 3-dimensional. And the way that you've used them really is very intricate, and the overlaps are very complex. The more you look at it, the more complex it gets.
Oh, thank you. I like the idea of transparency, that they're see through.
Yeah.
Any more questions? We could take one more question if someone has a,
Okay, I have a question for Richard.
okay.
Okay, Fred, let's have
Okay,
it.
Richard. Okay, I always find it interesting because I think of you as primarily a sculptor. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but that's what I sort of known you as mostly. And of course, you do great. So it's always interesting for me to see your drawings and paintings. I mean, they often can be like ideas for sculpture. I mean, these less so. These are more painterly. That one is definitely, that one has more of a sculptural feel to it. And but it's just interesting. Okay, so I'd just like you to talk more about the space of the paper, like the challenge of working on a space of a flat paper versus the challenge of this, you know, when you're working in 3 dimensions, because there it's like you have an endless space, right? I mean, sculpture, you can keep making it bigger and bigger.
Yes, yeah, in fact. Yeah.
But with painting, you know, you have your format and it's limited, and it's rectangular also. So anyway, if you want to just talk about that, that'd be interesting to hear.
Well, sure, I would be glad to. I think that at heart, really, I am more a sculptor, and I think one of the things about painters, people who are primarily painters, is that it may seem trite to say this, but generally when sculptors draw, their lines are very clear. It's what is and is not in a shape, in an area, is very clear. Whereas when somebody who's primarily a painter draws, often there can be kind of more mystery about what edges are, how one thing blends into another. And I think I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Why do I do one instead of another? A lot of it just has to do with what I can handle physically, honestly, and what I have space to store. So it's a lot of it is kind of settled on a practical basis. But I have to say, I agree with you.
Yeah, I can usually tell when I see a drawing by a sculptor. I can tell that it's by a sculptor. You know, I think of like Henry Moore's drawings. You can tell he's a sculptor. You know,
That's
because
right.
they have a lot of, well, they have a lot of volume to them, and like when you see his drawings, he's not really concerned that much with the rectangle of the page that he's working on.
No,
He's not concerned with that. You know, he's
right.
drawing ideas for sculptures.
That's right. Moore is one of my favorites. He's such a wonderful artist.
Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting the way, yeah, difference between painters and sculptors, the way they think. It's interesting.
I have a question, Richard. Thinking back to your beautiful, beautiful bronze sculptures of the vessels, I think you called them. Do you ever draw your?
Wait a minute, who's talking? I'd like to.
It's Joanne. Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
What? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you, Joanne. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm just thinking back to your series of sculptures when I first met you. They were called vessels. your bronze
Yes,
sculptures.
yes.
I was wondering, do you ever, I know that you draw and plan before you're creating the sculpture. Do you ever draw from the sculpture afterwards? Do
No,
drawings of them?
no.
No, I just wanted to.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Not that I'm aware of. Who knows? You know, we all have memories, right? In a way, it's sort of inescapable. That's a problem with making things, is that once you've made it, it's sort of you how do you get it? You made it, so it's part of your past in a way. Yeah.
Do you have another question, Susan? You need to unmute. You're still muted.
Okay,
There
I'm
you go.
muted. Okay.
Yeah.
I love the drawings, Richard. I think they're zany and they remind me of R. Crumb, a little bit of graffiti. They're very vital, and it's interesting to see that with, you know, the more traditional work. And it looks like you had a lot of fun doing them.
Do you want me to comment on that? I did have a lot of fun. Yes, it's true. And to me, any area that one works in is bound to have its own traditions and its own rules. And one only encounters a very small part of it. And I sometimes think that it's sort of like architecture, that there's more that's possible in architecture than any architect is going to do in a lifetime. And people have commented on that. I think it might have been, I'm not sure what sculptor it was. It might have been Moore who said that you couldn't do everything that comes into your head in 20 lifetimes, you know. So I guess I'm just glad if something in any way, shape, or form comes into my head. I hope that is some kind of a comment on that. But could you repeat your question? Could you? I'm just trying to stay on.
I don't think it was a question. It was a response to the work.
Okay.
To
Okay.
the work.
Okay.
And just, you know, it's a very different body of work. I know.
Yes.
That.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
It's a great title for your show in the project space, for three people to come together so cohesively and yet be true to yourselves, but true to form was a great title, I must say.
I agree with you.
Well,
We figured it out. Based on Fred's wonderful comment, and we tossed a few things around and came to true to form. So it was an easy, it was a very harmonious coming together.
Yeah, it's fun to see the sculptures together.
Yeah.
And Gail has some three-dimensional wall works as well.
right, the 3D theme went
Yeah,
through
it
the
was,
whole space.
yeah, it was a pretty wonderful gather. Yeah.
Can I mention something here? When first I heard the idea of putting sculptures into the show after the show was essentially chosen, I couldn't help but think, you know, this is really taking on a lot of risks because it's got to work, and we have much less time to get it done. But personally, I think it worked. And I'm happy with how it has worked, far beyond anything that I had imagined. So I think it's something that could be considered in the future, that actually having work in more than one kind of medium is, what do they say? If the shoe fits, wear it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I would also say that, I mean, something that I'm thinking about at this point in my life, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. I know I've been to your studio, Richard. My God, there's a lot of work. And Fred, I mean, you're everybody. We all have huge amount of work. And we also have work from the past that hasn't really been seen, or it certainly hasn't been seen by people who are familiar with our contemporary work. And I think there's a lot to be said for beginning to show some of that, because I mean, it really, it informs, and it's also, as you said, it just, it broadens the awareness of an individual's work.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see everyone's sculpture, and it's lovely to see all of this work. And so thank you so much, artists, and thank you, audience. As we wrap up, I'd like to just mention again that the shows are up through July 3rd. And did you want to say something, Richard?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for doing a great job. You're really, you do. I could, go on and on and on about how you do, but it's obvious that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, I agree too.
Me too.
Thank you, Karen. You could have another career as a host,
As
TV
an
host.
artist talk moderator.
Yeah, you could have your own
well,
show
Another one
on.
on your list, another one
Let
on
me
your
know.
list. Hey, our tech person there.
Yes.
And yes, and thank you to Kay very much.
And thank you, Kay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kay. That's right. Yes.
So come on by on July 3rd if you'd like to join the artists for an informal closing party. I also want to mention Gail has a show coming up July 2nd through 30th at Gowanus Dredger's Boathouse. So an interesting spot you might want to check out.
That'll
And-
be interesting. Through that.
Yeah, and and the July 9th from 4 to 6 is the opening reception for that show. So we'll have to try and make it over there. And then I want to mention Sequential Synergy, the Art of the Comic, is the next show coming up at 440 Gallery. And that opening reception is also July 9th, 3 to 6. So you're going to have to go first to Sequential Synergy and then wrap up your evening at Gail's opening at Gowanus Dredger. And that show, Sequential Synergy, is up July 8th through July 29th. So hope you can make it. So thanks everyone for coming. What a beautiful talk. See you next time.
Okay, thanks again, Karen.
Thank you.